Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Joanna Hernandez. On the show tonight,
There are some limitations to what we can do.
Chicago won't evict migrants until at least mid-March. A look at the possible impact. A new book teaches first-generation Latinos about navigating money and culture.
I realized the effort that my parents went through to come here, and I realized that I was part of their investment.
And from being undocumented to running a beauty school, we show you how a beauty salon is giving people opportunities. And now to some of today's top stories. Chicago Public School is responding to a police report filed by a CPS principal against CTU President Stacey Davis Gates. Yesterday, WTTW News exclusively reported that the principal at Stevenson Elementary on the south side filed a police report alleging Davis Gates told union members to, quote, punch their principal in the face. The report was signed by two witnesses who were at the meeting. No criminal charges were filed. In a statement, CPS said, while we don't speak to the details of a specific staff or student incident, we were made aware that a non-criminal report was filed with the Chicago Police Department, and we are providing staff with support as needed. In a letter to the union members, the Chicago Teachers Union called the story a media provocation and said, we believe that this police report was filed in reference to a comment made by President Davis Gates during an impromptu remarks to union members at CTU's Union Hall in January, while talking about using the contract to challenge principals who bully other members. The principal did not return calls or messages seeking comment. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago this summer is having an impact on the first day of classes for Chicago public school students. The district today proposed that school start on August 26 this year, still before Labor Day, but the week after the convention to accommodate the city's logistical needs and also to allow students time to attend, volunteer, and participate in the convention. This means classes would run until June 12th. The school board is expected to vote on this and the school calendar for the following school year at a board meeting later this month. For more on that, please visit our website. More than 75 Chicago Tribune staffers took part in a 24-hour nationwide strike today, along with 6 other newsrooms. The walkout is the single largest organized action journalists have taken against Alden Global Capital since the hedge fund purchased Tribune Publishing in 2021. The Chicago Tribune Guild claims the Trib's owners have shrunk staff by dozens, cut freelance budgets, and limited access to critical information. Up next, a look at the changing timeline migrants face at city shelters. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Mayor Johnson suspended the 60-day shelter limit for migrants for the third time this week. This means that more than 14,000 men, women, and children in city shelters will have until mid-March to find more permanent housing. Here's Mayor Johnson earlier this week on the policy.
Because our plan for temporary emergency shelter was never meant as a long-term housing solution. This is difficult for everyone, but there are some limitations to what we can do.
Joining us now with more are Annie Gomberg, a lead organizer with the police station response team, 40th Ward Alderman Andre Vasquez, who is chair of the City Council's Immigrant and Refugee Rights Committee, Jessica Draro, a professor at Chicago's Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice, and Beatriz Ponce de Leon, Chicago's Deputy Mayor for Immigrant, Migrant, and Refugee Rights. Thank you all for joining us. Now, I want to start off. Progressive aldermen were pushing Johnson to cancel the 60-day limit altogether. Deputy Mayor, why the suspension?
Well, when we first launched this policy, we knew that we would want to make some exceptions, and we built in the possibility of extending the 60-day policies for individuals based on either weather, personal medical reasons or other extenuating circumstances. So we've been working on that policy and understanding what implementation looks like. And we have heard from various people around the city about the difficulties that would be faced, especially given the weather. So this was our commitment to make sure that people have a safe place to go and that we are able to support them on their journey to resettle outside of the shelters.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the eviction process would work, or how does that look like?
Well, first, it's not an eviction process. As we've said many, many times, this is a temporary shelter situation. Nobody wants to live in congregate shelter, which is big open spaces, for a long period of time. And we've done everything possible to partner with the state that does all of the resettlement and housing rental support to help people through the journey of moving through the shelter system into their own spaces. What it looks like is, as people come in, they have a 60-day notice. Now there are different types of extensions that have been given, but in that moment, as they start their time in the shelter system, we have some touch points to support them in making a plan for moving out. The state does have rental assistance and housing case management. There are also limits to that, but most of the people who have gotten these notices will have access to that support. And if they don't, because rental assistance has changed, not everyone is eligible, then our various teams, both the city's case managers that are on staff there through our staffing agency, as well as the ones that are there from the Illinois Welcoming Centers and from the Catholic Charities staff, will work with people as much as possible to connect them to community resources so that they have a plan for moving on from the shelters.
And Annie Gomberg, I want to go to you. You have been on the ground helping people. What are you hearing people when they start thinking about where they would go next?
I think that there's a lot of confusion on the ground about the policy, about the process, about what happens next. As the deputy mayor mentioned, not everybody gets housing. Not everybody is going to be able to access those state vouchers for housing. And when you do not have the capacity to work and you don't have resources to put yourself into your own apartment, when you have children that are in school, and when you also have all the things that befall us all, illness and injury and other things, as well as the trauma of this journey, that's a lot for people to have to unpack, as well as to try to get a fresh start here in Chicago. So there's I think a lot of concern and a lot of worry and a lot of fear.
And Alderman Vasquez, what are your thoughts when it comes to March? What would that look like? What about do you see another continuous extension?
Well, so that's what we were calling for in drafting the letter is an end to the policy itself. Definitely understanding that there are constraints, but also looking at what the consequences could look like. So today could have been a completely different day where we were talking about 1,900 people who, depending on their situation, may not have had a place to go. And the way the system was communicated, they'd end up at a landing zone. Now, if that landing zone would have been full with people because we keep getting the buses, it creates different bottlenecks. And so recognizing that it is a larger problem, we are in an unprecedented crisis, what that could look like is folks on the street, homeless. It could look to people shoplifting more because they're trying to survive, young males being brought into gangs territory to find community. And so understanding that these lead to larger problems that lead to larger costs for the city, it made sense to kind of push back a little bit, because I think the administration may have only been hearing from people on the right who were saying, get rid of everyone.
So you would say that was a goal to stop?
Yeah, to be able to hear both sides of the equation. If you're hearing people saying, hey, when is this thing going to end? And not really thinking about what the next steps look like, you also need the counterbalance of, well, this is what it could look like if we don't actually take the right steps. Now, to be fair, we need a couple things to happen. We need the president of the country to give work authorizations to everyone who needs it, so people can actually get their own employment, add to our tax base, eliminate bottlenecks. And we need more partnership from the state so that other cities in Illinois, which is also a welcoming state, can take on some capacity, whatever that may look like. Because that's not currently the case, and the city's left to kind of shoulder a lot of that burden, you're left with these very pivotal and hard conversations. Which
leaves people like Annie Gomberg on the ground trying to help people. I mean, we've heard from you. And Jessica, I want to go to you. What challenges are migrants up against when it comes to finding and accessing housing?
I think that actually is one of the crucial questions. We are all talking about this crisis because of decades of disinvestment in low-income housing in the city, and this precedes this administration. But accessing housing is a lot more complicated than a policy that ideally gives people rental assistance, or even saying that landlords can't discriminate based on national immigration status or nationality. The fact is that we do have a city that is not nearly enough low-income housing, and people will not be able to find apartments unless they can also find work, which means they have to have work authorization. There's so many steps that are really out of the control of this city's administration, and really out of the control of volunteers. We've got people working so hard to plug holes that are then constantly flooding again. And I think really the low-income housing context in our city is one of the core problems that can't be solved in this crisis moment.
And Deputy Mayor, you did touch on it a little bit. How has the city been helping migrants find that long-term solution?
Well, I do want to take a step back and say that we have helped, in partnership with the state, 15,000 people already move through the shelter system and resettle in the Chicago area or reunite with friends and families somewhere else. That is funding that the state provides for Catholic Charities and New Life Centers, which have been tremendous partners in helping with housing, case management, and resettlement. And the city, our main goal has been providing that emergency shelter, immediate access to medical care, and taking care of the most basic needs. And if we think about it, in the last 7 or 8 months, we grew from a very small shelter system to being able to provide 15,000 bed capacity in 28 different locations. So I think that was record time in terms of opening shelter. And now we are in this phase where we will look at how we improve the quality of the experience in the shelters and really help people on that journey. It will take more than government. So I know that we, as Alderman Vasquez said, there are limited resources, both for the city, the state, and the county. We are also looking to build the capacity of our human services community through philanthropy, corporate philanthropy. We know that we've relied heavily on many volunteers and mutual aid groups that have stepped up and helped individual families as well as groups of people in such a variety of ways. But I think it's a moment, much like when the settlement house movement started in Chicago, it's another moment where all sectors of the city and the area, really, because we're a welcoming city and a welcoming state, will have to step up to do more to support people as they find ways to work and integrate into our communities.
Yeah, but something that we know is that this is clearly a political attack. It's much more of a national conversation because every generation, this narrative happens with every migrant population that comes in, but because you're having such a fight between the two parties in a presidential year.
And now there's so many opinions, so much criticism.
That's right.
Is the city doing enough? Who does it lie on?
And you've got Texas kind of weaponizing folks who need help and sending them to, to be fair, Texas is going through its own challenges, but to skip over states and send them only to Chicago is clearly a political attack. And so everyone is hands on deck trying to do the best as possible, whether it's volunteers or government. But again, it rests on the shoulders of the president to do the right thing here in a way that would allow everyone to find the solutions that are necessary.
I also think we have to think ahead about the next election, presidential election cycle. Some of what you're speaking to, I think the deputy mayor, mentions that government can't solve all the problems, and yet the infrastructure for supporting newcomers to our cities were gutted by the prior presidential administration. They were left so under-resourced, understaffed, and so stressed and traumatized themselves, they couldn't provide care for newcomers to the city because the administration was really out to decimate the system to support newcomers. And so now we have this crisis really falling into the hands of, I think, incredibly well-intentioned but overtaxed and under-resourced private sector. And I just think the volunteer network, unfortunately, doesn't have what we need either. So then I ask ourselves, how do we think about the next presidential cycle? How do we think about where we're going to be in November? And if we don't have lessons learned from this moment, I fear it's only going to get worse in the city.
And Annie, what are your thoughts?
I'm listening to all of this. I think all of this makes a lot of sense. But when I was thinking about this potential eviction and those 1,900 people going back to the landing zone, we talk about the landing zone like it's a place. That is the street. That is 8 city buses. The landing zone is not a place that we need to be putting people at all. And the idea that it's empty right now gives all of the volunteers who are in, as Jessica said, a real desperate need of a break, we can breathe a little bit, knowing that that is not being used. I think that it's really difficult to telescope in and out of the immediate and the urgent and the survival needs of people, which is really where volunteers have been living for the last 8 months, to the important, which is the planning and the vision. And that's what we're really looking for from our mayor, from our governor, and of course from the president.
Well, to that end, we have consistently.
So we only have a
planned-
couple seconds, so go ahead.
City,
Mayor
state,
Deputy.
and county meet regularly. We are planning a more regional approach, and it definitely will include our continued advocacy at the federal level, because this is a federal matter that should be coordinated nationally by our federal government and funded appropriately. And all of what you've spoken to is correct.
Well,
it is
thank
not
you.
something we can handle totally locally.
Thank you. I apologize. That's all we have. All right. Our thanks to Annie Gomberg, Alderman Andres Vasquez, Jessica Drawer, and Beatriz Ponce de Leon. Up next, how first-generation Americans can build generational wealth. For first-generation individuals, building wealth can be intimidating. And while learning how to navigate finances can be challenging, it is possible. Our next guest has made it her life's mission to pass on lessons and teach others how to tackle their finances while unpacking culture and systemic barriers. That's the subject of a released best-selling book, Cultura and Cash, Lessons from the First-Gen Mentor for Managing Finances and Culture Expectations. And author Giovanna Gonzalez joins us now. I am so excited that you're joining us. This is your book. I love the color of your book. So I read the first chapters, and off the bat, what stood out to me was when you wrote, nobody teaches us how money works. It's not taught to us in school. And if you have immigrant parents like me, it likely wasn't taught to you at home. I felt that. I felt like I never grew up learning how to save money. My dad was like, save money, but I'm like, how? You know, can you tell me a little bit about the challenges you had with money growing up?
Yeah, so I'm lucky that we never went without. You know, we very much lived in a low-income household, but I didn't suffer from food scarcity or being unhoused like a lot of people in my community. But when I was in my 20s, that's when I had a lot of financial challenges, and that was because I didn't have a safety net. I don't have rich parents. You know, my parents have immigrant roots, so that meant that if I was in a bad situation where I was at work and I was getting burnt out, I couldn't afford to quit. I had to keep working, and it affected my health. Or if I was stuck in a nightmare roommate situation from this person I randomly met on Craigslist, again, I was stuck in these situations.
I've been there.
Yeah. I think we all have. It was like a part of our 20s, right? So those were the challenges for me in my 20s. And again, I'm like, oh, it's because I don't have parents to bail me out, and it's because my parents are doing the best they can with what they have.
And you're known as Gigi to your followers on TikToks. On your TikTok, how did you start sharing your experiences? And when people started sending you messages, when did you realize, like, whoa, I have something going on here? I'm growing a following on TikTok.
Yeah, so I think it'll help if you know a little bit about my professional background. So I spent 10 years working in financial services. Most recently, I was working in investment management. And on the side, I developed a passion for financial literacy. After I read 50 money books, I said, how can I share this knowledge with other women of color? So I looked into local organizations, and I found a nonprofit called the YWCA. So I volunteered as a financial educator. I did that for almost 2 years while I did my corporate job. And then I started adding these same tips on TikTok in March of 2021, and that took a life of its own.
Wow, and then it just fell off. Now tell me a little bit about the journey to write Cultura and Cash.
Yeah. So Cultura and Cash came about funding I got from the TikTok Latinx Creatives Grant. So that's in partnership with Macro and Unbelievable. And because I was a TikTok creator, I was eligible for this grant. They picked 10 winners to fund their dream project. So for me, it was to write this book for the first-gen community.
So that really allowed you to be able to write this book.
Absolutely. The cost of publishing a book are extremely expensive.
And why Cultura and Cash? What's the connection?
Yeah, because our culture very much affects how we navigate money. And there were no other books, and again, I read over 50, and none of them address that. So even though I learned a lot from those books, the ABCs of how to build wealth, how to save money, how to pay off debt, nobody in those books taught me how to manage money with the cultural expectations that my Latino family had.
I think I did read in a chapter about going out to eat and spending that type of money and paying for your family.
Yeah.
That's very true. Sometimes those kind of financial books don't carry that. Is that what you wanted your book to have?
Absolutely, yeah. Every section, there's 5 pillars, so I call it the first gen 5. So it focuses on building emergency funds, learning how to budget, paying off debt, credit building, and investing. So I teach all the ABCs of those 5 financial pillars, but then at the end, I'm always like, how do emergency funds play with your family? So what if they have a financial emergency? You don't use your emergency fund, you use another emergency fund that you set up for family only. Or if you're regularly providing financial support to family, add them into a line in your budget.
Those are some tips.
Yeah.
Wow, and what has it been like for your family?
To see me as an author?
To see you as an author. Like, how do you feel? Like, you're an author. Like, I know it has been a long journey. I'm sure with many obstacles.
Yeah.
What has that been like for your family to see you?
Yeah, they're extremely proud, especially my grandma. You know, I recently had a conversation with her because I recently found out how poor she grew up. And I said, Grandma, all that suffering wasn't for anything. I now get to empower other women so that they don't have to suffer as much as you did and have the financial stability that she always craved.
What would you say that you want people to feel when they open their book and they finish reading your book? What do you want them to feel?
Seen, heard, validated. My book is to inspire action. So it would be a failure if people read the book and they don't take action. So I want them to be like, yeah, money's for me too.
And it's possible.
Yes.
It's possible to save and live a good life.
Absolutely. We have more obstacles and the book acknowledges that, but it is very possible.
Now, we only have a couple seconds, but what's one tip that you want to tell to other fellow Latinas?
Yeah, I would say take ownership of your financial literacy journey. That's what really empowered me. At first, you know, the language is very scary, but the more that you read books, you listen to podcasts, you get more familiar with the language.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Wish you all the best.
Thanks for having me on.
Our thanks to Gigi Gonzalez. Up next, a look inside a local beauty school with a mission. A local beauty school is offering more than just haircuts. We headed to a cosmetology academy in the back of the yards to meet with the owner, who is using his entrepreneur spirit to guide his students through the beauty industry.
Ah, ok, perfecto. ¿Y también el color?
También el color lo hice yo, sí.
Muy bonito.
Jaime Romero knows what it's like to face obstacles being undocumented.
We help a lot of people that where English is a barrier. So we have bilingual instructors. We help a lot of students that are coming in from other countries and they're in the process of fixing their papers. Okay, visible y invisible. Como invertida, ¿verdad? Ah, okay, muy bien, muy bien.
Romero says he never imagined he was going to own a beauty school one day.
I was going to school to be a mechanical engineer. I was working as a machinist, but during that time I was undocumented, so I ended up losing my job.
When his dreams of following in his father's footsteps of becoming a mechanical engineer came crashing down, he pivoted.
I mean, it was one of those moments where you're like, okay, what am I going to do in my life now? You know, where do I go? And my mom was like, pick up a pair of scissors and come work with me.
Leading him to enroll in the Futureama Beauty Academy to obtain his cosmetology license, the school he now owns.
A haircut is all about geometry, it's all about symmetry and art. So I was able to blend that together and I realized that I was pretty good at it.
The beauty school has been a community staple for over 30 years. When the owner died, Romero became part owner in 2018.
When I ended up finalizing the paperwork and it was finally, I became majority owner, my first day in the office, I looked out of the office and there was literally only one student.
Determined to grow the business, he found opportunities to participate in fashion shows, exposing his students to another side of the industry.
We started doing the fashion shows, and in 2019, I don't know why, I said, let's go to the New York Fashion Week. And sure enough, just persistence, we actually got invited.
For students like Loera León, it was the first time she had access to work a runway show.
Me sentí un poco intimidada porque es un reto, pues, peinar modelos profesionales, algo nuevo para uno, pero sí se puede.
The academy teaches everything from hair and nails to makeup, offering a flexible class schedule. Students have up to 7 years to finish the program.
So right now they're practicing updos. Like I said, we've been doing a lot of fashion shows. Speed is important.
For Romero, his determination to succeed goes beyond the school. When his parents and 2 brothers migrated to the United States, he was 7 years old.
Just knowing the sacrifice that my parents did, they sacrificed everybody for us.
You feel that? You saw it?
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like it's my responsibility.
A responsibility to not only make a name for himself in the beauty industry, but uplift others to do the same.
I was in their shoes, so by them seeing that, hey, I came in just like you, and now I'm the owner of this academy. So
It's emotional. It is emotional.
It is.
What makes you? It's okay.
It's like simple. Yeah.
What makes you? Like, what is that emotion?
I mean, it's just like, sí se puede.
Romero will soon open his first barbershop inside the former Goldblatt Brothers building as part of a massive Back of the Yards project, where he hopes to provide his students with more jobs. And what's that saying, when one door closes, another door opens? When you have that determination and passion, anything is possible. And that's our show tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 7 for the Weekend Review. Now, from all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Joanna Hernandez. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.